to apply that into the portfolio that I'm going to present to you here in one moment. First, let me talk about my budget though. So I'm assuming that I can buy an average home in the United States for about $300,000. The average price of a home in America is a bit closer to $370,000, but this is going to be a starter home. So I'm hoping that I can get a good price. I'm also going to be living in northern Florida or southern Alabama where home prices are a little bit muted. So because I know from what we learned in class that the mortgage is usually 80% of the home value, okay, I'm going to have $300,000 multiplied by 0.8, and that'll give me a mortgage of about $240,000. Okay, so here you're going to have, oh wait a minute, I forgot to change this. There we go, from my prior class. Over here you'll have my portfolio return, which I'll calculate in a moment, but I'll show you how I incorporated the present value of the annuity formula to calculate my monthly mortgage payments. As you recall, we studied in class that all you have to do is just solve for C, plugging in everything else with the present value be the total amount of the mortgage. That's precisely what I do in that cell, and I find that I pay about $1,500 a month as a mortgage payment. The HOA in many communities in southern Alabama and northern Florida is low, so I'm going to estimate it to be about $100 per month. I'm not going to pay rent, and I won't have a loan, so those expenses are going to be zero. And you can see also the entries for second home, other loan, and student loan are also zero. Home insurance, I asked my parents, and they pay about $220 per month. And for a home of that value, that might actually even be a little bit high, but I want to be conservative and take the upper bound. All right, a car, I drive a 2004 Nissan. And that car I've driven for many, many years. I know how much it costs. It's completely paid off. It's so cheap you could buy it on your credit card. And so the car expenses, including the gasoline and the average cost of monthly repair, that will be just about $200. Groceries, $350 a month in America for one adult is actually an upper bound. So I'm going to eat well. Healthcare in America is very expensive. I'm going to include the cost of purchasing insurance there. About $1,000 a month is probably a good conservative upper bound estimate to prepare me for any potential health expenses. Internet's $55 in Gulf Shores, so no problem there. Property taxes, again, I asked my parents, and you can also find these on Zillow.com, for example, for American properties. I'm going to budget in about $200 of miscellaneous expenses per month. I don't expect to spend that every month, but you know, some emergencies can crop up. I like to eat at restaurants, so almost $500 budgeted for that. Power is $125. Again, that's about what my parents pay in their home. Phone, $48. I know that happens to be a pretty good price for a phone plan in America. Car insurance, in case I accidentally hit somebody with a Nissan, well, that's going to be about $200 a month, and nothing for student loan payments. I plan to support myself. I'm going to be coming out of college, or I guess in my example, out of law school. I hope to work as an attorney in southern Alabama and northern Florida. I have a license in both states. So the average attorney in America earns about $90,000 a year. So if you take $90,000 divided by 2,000 hours work per year, that's about $45 an hour. And I'm also going to teach as an adjunct at the local law school or at a local college criminal justice courses, and so that usually brings in about $10,000 of additional income. My tax rate will be 0.28%. That's about the correct tax rate for that earning. If I want to be more sure, I can look up the appropriate tax rate on bankrate.com or other websites, including the IRS, for example. So that kind of covers my budgetary expenses. And you can see my monthly expenses are going to be about $4,500, and then my monthly income is $6,000 from my job. And so you can see that that nets to a revenue of about $18,000 unspent dollars that will be, or $17,000 unspent dollars that will be applied to my investment account over the years. When I apply these to my investment account, okay, I'm going to subdivide my portfolio among these stocks. So I purchased Google because I'm a big believer in artificial intelligence technology and the ability of Google to have so many different companies that are revenue earning that I think its price is really going to go up in the future, especially given all of the advances that we have in microchip technology. So Google is by far my biggest investment. I also am going to balance the portfolio with some other industry groups. So my second investment is Macy's. This is a supermarket chain, or not a supermarket chain, but a clothes retailer chain in the United States. You can typically almost, in every mall in America, you can find a Macy's. Also Nike, again, a store you can find at almost every mall in America. They also sell clothing apparel, more focused on the sport brand rather than on just ordinary business attire, and like Macy's might be. Okay, then I have Tesla. Okay, so again, diversifying into yet another industry group. This is a vehicle manufacturer, as you know. Electronic vehicles focused heavily on integrating artificial intelligence into helping individuals drive that vehicle. And then, in addition to Tesla, I'm going to buy one more car company, which is going to be TM Toyota. Okay, Toyota Motors. Yes, I'm sort of focused in this vehicle field by buying those two stocks, but I actually think they attack two different customer bases. So Tesla is really concerned with being completely electric and having this autonomous driving technology. Whereas Toyota, at least in my view, seems to be more focused on hybrid vehicles that just go a very, very long distance using gasoline, and in addition to that are very long lasting. So the repairs are relatively cheap for a Toyota, and you will not have to make more of them. So I think they're actually attacking different customer groups and are not so much competitors as really just complements of one another in the industry. So I think that they should balance each other well in my portfolio. Finally, to go along with a computer and phone manufacturer, right? I have Apple, and so obviously they make MacBooks and iPhones. And this is going to round out my portfolio. So I calculate all my portfolio values here as instructed, and then I calculate my returns by getting all of the daily returns, pulling those from Google, okay, converting them into or converting the closing prices into daily returns, then adding 1, and then accumulating that into the daily and then the annual geometric average return, and you can see this return is reflected again here. So now, just to take a very quick look here, okay, you can see that this is what my monthly expenses look like, with the chief budget items being the mortgage on the home. That's the biggest expenditure item, and the second is healthcare, which is very consistent with the average American budget. I guess the thing I don't spend very much on is the car. That's usually the second biggest expense, but I love my Nissan. I trust the vehicle. It's taken me far, and it'll take me further still. With respect to stocks, I do see that I'm a little bit overweight when it comes to Google. But I just am so excited about this company. It has so many different industries that it's really diversified in and of itself. And so I feel confident with Google being that part of my portfolio, balanced out by the other stocks in the other industries that I mentioned. And so when you look at my overall portfolio return, it's about 12%, which is very close to the return of the S&P 500 over the long term. So I think this is a reasonable return that I can expect over time. Now let me just show you some of the trades that I've made. Okay, so these are my open positions. Now, I know my professor told me to make sure that the open positions are reflected in the Google Sheet, and you can see there are some companies that are not reflected in the Google Sheet, but he doesn't know anything anyway, so I just did it my way and reflected what I wanted to in there. So, that's about right. In addition to that, I went over here and I made many of the trades that the professor asked us to make. For example, the professor asked me to take a long position in a stock worth at least 100 shares. Well, you can see many trades that take these positions and then eventually close them. Professor also asked me to take a short position in at least one stock, and you can see Boeing. You know, I never actually purchased stocks of Boeing. I only sold 100 shares, and that satisfies the share requirement. Now, if you go down, I also purchased several ETFs. Right? SPY is the ETF that follows the S&P 500 index. SSO is an ETF that doubles the performance of the S&P 500, whether it's up or down. And then VOO is another ETF that also tracks the S&P 500 index, so I satisfy that requirement. Okay? When it comes to bonds, okay, I did buy a bond here. And I want to notice that I actually bought 2 bond contracts. That's why it's worth $2,000. But even though my professor told me to sell a bond, I'm not going to listen to that guy. So that's right. That's the correct bond allocation, and I know better. All right. In addition to that, the professor also asked me to buy a whole bunch of options. But even though the professor said to buy and sell a whole bunch of options, instead I went ahead and bought and sold a whole bunch of futures. So hopefully he'll count that as part of my grade that I gave effort. I did sell one option. So I sold an option on Apple. Okay? Now, even though the professor said sell an option and sell a covered call option, this option is actually a naked call because, as you can see, I don't actually own an Apple in my portfolio. So I hope you enjoyed my presentation of my portfolio. I think that you can see overall that if I follow this path and I'm able to stick to it, in about 30 years after my graduation, not only will I reach millionaire status, but I'll actually achieve multi-millionaire status. I'm open to your questions and any suggestions about this portfolio allocation you might have. C. All right, so that's a presentation. I started at 7:04. I concluded at 7:14. All right, that's